Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
Welcome to the Healers Café, and today I have the pleasure of having a conversation with Dr. Elizabeth Hughes. Let me just tell you a little bit about her. So she is a Standford trained physician with more than 25 years of clinical experience. And after treating thousands of patients with stress-related illness and having her own life nearly ruined by stress and chronic anxiety, she realized that the conventional medical approach is completely inadequate to treat stress-related conditions. Dr. Hughes has developed the Stress Antidote system, a unique process to turn off the body's harmful stress response. She has helped clients all over the world overcome the root cause of their stress and reverse symptoms of stress-related illness. And her vision ultimately is the complete elimination of stress-related illness before the end of this century. So small feat. Anyways.
That's it.
That's it. Okay. So anyway, I'm thrilled to have you here. And I guess, my first question is, like, what happened in your life that made you realize that you were looking for solutions that were not available in your training?
Oh, well, first off, thank you for having me. This is really great fun. I'm really excited. So I think my journey to that point where I said I have to do something different was sort of slow. And I look back on it now and I wonder why it took so long. I think the first hint that I had that something really wasn't quite right with how doctors treat illnesses was really seeing how many people had all the symptoms of a condition called Cushing's disease. And you may be familiar with it, but I'll just explain for people who don't. So Cushing's disease is overproduction of adrenal hormones caused by a pituitary tumor. And I was actually reading in the Journal of the American Medical Association a little retrospective about Dr. Harvey Cushing and how he determined this illness. And it was really quite a triumph in 1912 to figure this out when there weren't x-rays and he couldn't do surgery and all of those things. So that was the focus of the article I was reading. But his first patient, a woman named Minnie, had obesity. She was hypertensive. She didn't have her period, so she couldn't have children. She had acne. She had excess hair growth. She had muscle wasting and stretch marks. And I was reading this article over lunch one day in my office, and I said, "That's everybody I saw this morning." So what struck me was something that went from being a rare, unusual condition became 100% normal 100 years later, really, or slightly less than 100 years later. And that struck me. And somewhere in that same medical journal or in the same pile of journals I was catching up on while I was trying to eat lunch, there was another article about how we're not going to have enough doctors. I'm in the United States, so we're not going to have enough doctors in the United States with the aging population, and medical schools really haven't kept pace. And I thought to myself, but maybe all of this illness that we're seeing is not necessary. Maybe there's too much illness. and we have plenty of doctors. So those ideas kind of rattled around in my head for a few years, and I didn't make anything of it. And I actually now, and the funny thing was, at the time that I had this discovery, I myself was constantly anxious. I had an incredible anxiety disorder, and which I thought was normal. How else do you get through medical school? You need an anxiety disorder, right? But I also
Isn't that adrenaline?
Right, exactly. I ran on it all the time. But I had, I was constantly anxious. I was exhausted, and yet I couldn't sleep well. I was weak. I had brain fog, and I had all of those symptoms, many of the symptoms as well. I wasn't wrestling with, let's say, high blood pressure, but many of those same adrenal excess problems or adrenal overexhaustion problems I was having as well. And I was like, wait, something's not right here. So I soldiered on for a few years, and then saw a woman who got a complete resolution of a chronic skin condition, or an incurable skin condition. She was getting ready for surgery to hopefully correct a large non-healing ulcer on her leg, where she healed that leg in 3 weeks with just a change in belief. She had been told by every doctor she'd seen that she was too old and it would never heal. And I spontaneously said, well, that's ridiculous. You're going to be able to heal it. And sure enough, it did. And all of these things sort of all together made me say, there's something I need to do here. There's something I need to look at. And at that point, it was kind of like I was walking into this new candy shop of ideas, and I didn't know what to try first. I was studying everything and looking at everything, reading everything I could. It was confusing and overwhelming and exciting all at the same time.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like, many of the patients that have come to see me are so confused, right? Because once you lose the connection with your medical doctor, who can't do anything except more drugs and more disease management, and there's more, it's
Right.
like, wow. Where do you start?
Right.
Yeah,
And
no.
there's very little way to guide people towards what they need. And that's something I experienced for myself, because I had to get myself well first. And it's something I know that all of my clients have experienced. And
so then that was your beginning of like knowing there's more. And then, so how did you start knowing the thing that was right for you? What was that process like?
You mean right for me personally, or
Yeah,
right for me professionally?
Well, both, actually.
Okay.
I was going to go personal first, because
Sure.
I think, to me, that's one of the things in the book, that my upcoming book, it's really about aligning. What is that thing that that makes sense, that this is the door you should open first, so how is it for you?
Well, that was probably the scariest thing for me, because I started to have basically being woken up in the middle of a night with almost feeling as if someone was shaking me. I live in Seattle. I live in earthquake country. We get earthquakes here now and again, and I kind of felt like it was shaking. And I was like, and I, with this sort of voice that was me but wasn't me in my head, saying, "You're doing it wrong." Now that was frightening, because as a doctor, I'm not allowed to do anything wrong. I'm just not allowed to, like, perfection is expected. But it was also very sort of imprecise, because what was it? What was it? And so in some ways, then I said, I need to figure out what the messages my body might be sending is. And I don't know why that was the first place, but all I knew was I could only sort of listen to myself and find out what that was that I might be doing wrong. And, so I started not only to look at what I thought was true about and what I assumed from medical school about how health and illness works. There's a bias towards detecting illness in the medical world and not celebrating and amplifying health. So that was the first place to go. And then I became very interested in the beliefs around that we're all sick, we're all dying, we're all falling apart, which isn't true.
Okay, so that wake up, basically, the little tremor,
right,
was saying, or lets you know, that was your hint that there's a messaging in the subconscious that is informing you of something, and then it's time to figure out, where's this coming from?
Right.
Then what?
Then what? Well, so I had joined a health coaching program and became a certified health coach. One of the guest lecturers was a man named Bruce Lipton, Dr. Bruce Lipton, whom you may know or have heard of, but he works on epigenetics. And he mentioned, he gave a lecture on epigenetics and gave us reading material and mentioned this technique called Psych-Hay, which I had never heard of before. But it said, this is, sort of how to change your subconscious beliefs that then change your, genetic makeup. And I was like, all right, here's another medical person talking about something that I want to understand. And so I actually did the sight unseen, didn't know what I was getting into. I'm going to go and get trained, at least do the basic training in this modality of Psych-Hay, which is a subconscious belief change process. In the first hour of my training, the facilitator of the workshop cured my lifelong cat allergy. And I knew that it had been cured because she actually was running the workshop in her home where she had 2 cats. And she asked, is anybody allergic to cats? And I said, well, me. And she said, okay, we'll change that for you. And I spent the whole week, the whole 4 days in her home with the 2 cats without sneezing or having any itchy eyes, no runny nose or anything like that. And that sensation of rightness, that sensation of this really is a change, that's what really made me feel like I was on the right path.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's amazing how, at least I've noticed, you have to experience to believe. And especially, if you have, if you're science-based, if you're medically trained, if you have, built-in bias assumptions of how things work, even if it's towards disease management, as you say, like there's not much emphasis towards healing. In fact, there's not even a philosophy of healing, because that's not really, it doesn't appear to be one of the options.
Right, exactly.
With all the, incurables out there. It's like the untouchables. It's like, really? Is that true? But yeah, but it's like, when you experience it, it's really hard to turn like that off. You can't deny your own experience.
Exactly. And that is one of the things that I realized for myself. And one of the things that I realized then in starting to work with clients was that they need to have that experience of what it feels like to feel healthy or stress-free. And once you get that, it's undeniable, and it's also your guide. You can start to use that. I'm going off course because I've lost that feeling, or it's harder for me to get back on that course.
Oh yeah, I've got chills. We are exactly on the same path.
Right. And
that's amazing.
Yeah. And so I tried, when I had anxiety, I tried all the stress management things. I tried multiple different forms of meditation. I was practicing yoga actively and was totally stressed out. And I realized that none of these standard techniques for dealing with stress actually gave you that experience of what I call like embodied rightness. That like if they gave that to you right up front and said, this is where you're heading, this is what you want, you're aiming for this, that would have helped a lot. Because the idea was just, okay, sit and breathe, and eventually you'll feel better. Didn't feel right.
Yeah, no, that's actually, yeah, that really that's well put, and it is my experience, but you've really summed it in a way that, yeah, I'm like looking at what my problem, because for me this whole field obviously is fascinating.
Of course.
How do you empower people to really take charge of themselves when there are no other apparent solutions, right? And I think that it's the embodied experience. It really comes to, they have some measure to be able to come back to notice that, that's what it feels like. And now, I'm deviating from it, or I wonder if it's this and that caused me to go off track of that inner.
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm. It really isn't, there is no, there's diagnostics, but it doesn't tell you, how you feel.
Right. Well, and that's the problem with so many folks, is that they don't feel well when the medical world will say, well, you're perfectly healthy, there's nothing wrong with you. And that's disempowering. It's I call it victim blaming. That's just, you're really blaming the victim for feeling badly. You shouldn't feel badly. Your numbers are normal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Numbers are normal, therefore you're abnormal for not feeling as the labs represent you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's why, like, I ended up feeling like I'm treating a whole bunch of healthy people who can barely walk. And think straight. Yeah, that's scary.
Right.
So tell me, what is it that so what's the focus of let me make sure I've got the name of what it is that you create, the Stress Antidote system. Like, what is it? What is it?
Well, so I started to really, because this played into how my life went, was the role of stress playing with illness, and started to and in medicine, in medical school, you don't talk about stress. You don't talk about it at all. And yet it underlies probably 75+% of medical visits have some component of stress-related illness. Mm-hmm. So the way I started to look at this is that your body has sort of two modes. It operates when the stress neurotransmitters and hormones, I call them the stress molecules, are running through your body. The whole body behaves in one way. And when they're not there, and when you have your rest and restore and repair hormones and molecules running through your body behaves in a totally different way. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or Bruce Banner and the Hulk, or something like that. It's like we've got two of us in ourselves. Okay. And so learning how to notice that those stress molecules are being released, and then how really to very simply turn that off is the focus of what I do. That is the Stress Antidote program that I use for people. And it is, as we've been talking about, this embodied feeling. And then there's processes so that you can make sure that it gets embedded into your life really easily. Because health is not supposed to be difficult. We're not supposed to struggle. We're not supposed to strive. We're not supposed to deny ourselves. We're just not, it's not supposed to be hard work. And believe it or not, by letting your body lead and doing the fun things it wants to do, it takes care of you. It takes care of itself. It's amazing.
Hmm. So, okay, I'm going to get more nosy.
Sure, please.
So what's the method in which you get people to have that initial embodied feeling?
So I actually have people envision situations where they have felt that they trusted someone. Because when you come down to it, stress is a feeling of, I'm in danger, I can't handle this. And the opposite feeling of that is, I trust, I'm cared for.
Yeah.
And so I approach illness on this, like, what is your body saying and what is the opposite feeling, not the opposite molecule or something like that. And so when I take a person through an exercise of feeling and remembering a period of time when they felt that deep trust, they suddenly like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is your body turning on. This is what it's supposed to do. And that's the start of what I do. And then we do exercises to, we do exercises to help you feel that momentum going towards that. Again, an embodied practice so that feels natural. And then, of course, there's, and on the longer term, there are all sorts of things come up because, your neighbor, mother, sister, doctor, everybody is going to tell you you're crazy. And so we talk about all of those stumbling blocks and all of those resistance that's going to come up, and even memories from the past that would throw you off the course. We work on all of that. But that initial experience of trust is where it all starts.
So how do you explain or work with, because I can understand how trust has a feeling, and if you could embody that feeling, but what's your understanding of the subconscious and the awareness consciousness piece? Because I think both are at play. And I'm just wondering, sort of, what are your understandings or theories between bringing up potentially the sabotaging unconscious, subconscious, and the well-intended awareness of, let's say, trust. If we just use trust as an example. So your patient now knows and remembers trust and has embodied that. How do you deal with the internal unknown subconscious that might be knocking that down?
Oh, so, well, that's part of the energy medicine technique, the psyche that I use. So we go in and we say things like, well, everybody in my family has had cancer, so I'm bound to have cancer, something like that. So those individual beliefs that you may have about genetic patterns or family or anything else, we address those. But once you've had that feeling of trust, you can suddenly say, wait, so when I feel that, I go off. I'm going to veer off course a little bit and have a conversation about the word subconscious. Subconscious makes it sound like it's lesser or unimportant or buried. And I use the term, but I really would prefer to use sort of your body wisdom and your head wisdom, rather than conscious and subconscious. It's there. We have access to it all the time. It's not dark. It's not deep. It is the thing that keeps our heart ticking and ourselves breathing. So the subconscious is not something that's so incredibly inaccessible. It's right there. You can find what you need from it and talk to it.
Yeah.
And most of our quote unquote subconscious things that are knocking us off course really aren't that subconscious. We know what they are. We just like pay no attention to that belief over there in the corner.
Right. So do you are you familiar with the work of like Byron Katie or, yeah. So like where she goes, is it true? Is it true? And she takes the thought and then allows you to flip it and see whether the opposite is maybe even more true, and then reapply it in your life. Because in everything we say or do, there are things that we take so-called for granted, right?
Right.
So is your feeling / understanding, because I'm going to go in both ways,
Yeah.
is it that we actually have all the information and that we just don't pay enough attention because we don't know how to read our body?
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Could not agree
Mm-hmm.
more. And I do teach my clients different ways to read or communicate with your subconscious. So they're kind of like, they're not bridges, but until you really have that feeling, you can use kinesiology or muscle testing. You can use getting in touch with your gut feeling and how that works. You can use some specialized writing techniques. So I teach people ways to really get to the essence of what your body wisdom or your deep knowledge is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so people who talk about, because in the world that treats or claims to affect the unconscious and subconscious, there's a lot of dialogue about there is disempowering dialogue, let's say, that you don't know what it is because it's hidden from you.
Yeah. So yes, absolutely. And so what's interesting is I've worked now with enough clients and thousands of patients to realize that there's a very similar set of those disempowering, limiting beliefs that we're all walking around with. It's kind of like we've got 2 arms, 2 legs, and this set of beliefs like my body is fragile, my body is frail. And so we go right into those because every single solitary person I work with has them to some extent.
As part of the human condition. It's not.
It's part of the human condition, yeah. Right. Okay. I think the first time you stand up, first time you fall over and skin a knee, something clicks in. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm mortal. I can be hurt. And the beliefs get sort of just compounded and layered on from there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So is that how you see, so let's say trauma, right? How do you, and again, if this is not because your expertise is stress, but right. Obviously trauma that
play into each other, yes.
Emotional trauma is, it could be physical trauma that has an emotional basis as well, mm-hmm. whichever, but like incest or like which at least I've noticed that people don't always remember. It's been so cut off from them. Right. But when they're actually healing, these memories become available to them.
Yes. And it can be extremely distressing. And I have techniques to help people sit with these memories in a safe way, mm-hmm. so that they can then get peace and non-attachment. Almost like they can see a picture of it happening to them on a film, but it doesn't have that same emotional grab that it does. And that's a process, and we do that because lots of people, I mean, there's unprecedented amount of violence and frightening things that happen to people. And even if it didn't seem like a big capital T trauma, it's still traumatic. And absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think everybody could use redoing some memories.
Yeah, I would agree. Okay. Okay, no, that's fascinating. So mindset, like, tell me a little bit more about your views on mindset and the importance it has in healing.
Oh yeah. So as part of my re-education or my re-medical education, I read basically every self-healing book that I could, the books on I healed cancer, I cured multiple sclerosis, and I read thousands of case reports of people in medical journals. And it all struck me that it came down to a point, each and every one of these accounts, I'll call it, these stories that people had, came down to this point where they said to themselves, I can do something different. I mean, people voice it in different ways. People will say something like, I know there's a solution and I'm going to find it. Or my body made this cancer, my body can get rid of it. But there was some sort of moment of switch that went from something bad is happening to me to I have the ability to affect what's happening to me. And I think that's an incredibly important component of healing.
Yeah, it's like from victimhood to agency, right? It's that,
exactly.
I concur. That's the shift where then opportunity shows up, right?
And I liken it to the elite athletes. Elite athletes spend much more, they don't work out all the time the way you might think they do. They spend a lot of time on their mindset. And, and that allows them to do these inhuman, impossible things. And when you talk to someone who's survived stage 4 cancer or major trauma, they have the same mindset as the elite athletes. I can do it. I can, do the impossible. And that's the key thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lot of room in so-called combating, and I'm using that word in brackets because I don't like the term per se, but if the diseases we're told are incurable, then there's room for people to make things possible in the impossible, right? And
Absolutely.
and I think in a strange kind of way, it's like it's a strange motivator. But I'm trying to find some good things to say about the disease focus, disease management, disempowering kind of health that this century medicine has become. So I'm just like, that might be it. But so how do you look at again, or put it this way, have you received much flack from other MDs or even naturopathic doctors? I know you were mentioning you were in a clinic with other naturopathic doctors, and so what happens, like, because there's a real shift there, and I know what you're saying.
Right.
So what has been your experience?
So a lot of my colleagues, professional, graduate school level colleagues, will sort of go, that's very nice, and I want to talk to someone else now. But there are people then who will come to me and say, can I have your card? I need to talk with you. It's almost like it's this secret society of people who are thinking about that. And I would say probably 50, not quite 50%, but pretty close to 50% of my coaching practice is medical professionals, doctors, naturopaths, RNs, people, therapists. I see a lot of therapists. People who have this advanced training in the medical model, who have that same feeling that there's something not right about it. So maybe officially they may not want to talk about it that much, but they're interested.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, and how do you, this is another one that comes up, because, naturopaths, and I'm a naturopathic, doctor myself, we're up against a lot of credibility issues. One, because the public doesn't know how much we actually have to study, and they don't know that it's 4-year full time. You still need your science degree, you still need clinical, and we read all the pathology and all of that stuff. So our governing bodies and associations are extremely hard on double-blind or science-based studies. And so how do you deal with all that? yourself?
How do I deal with the natural?
Like, with saying, well, is it science-based?
For what I do?
Yeah. How do you deal?
Oh, well, so if we're talking, I mean, really about the basis of the science of self-healing, let's call that what we're working on. We're talking about the science of self-healing.
Mhm.
There are thousands of studies published every month that prove it. It is the placebo effect. That is the science of self-healing. And we were talking earlier about the biases. Well, the placebo effect works, but we're taught that it's not important, it isn't valid, because the doctor didn't do anything. We totally discount what the patient does for themselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so now when I encounter a new medication and I read, like the science and the actual difference, and sometimes you find out that, half or more of the effect of a new medication is the placebo effect, and so you're like, that's not, getting better is getting better is getting better. Doesn't matter who does it. And so anybody who says, well, this isn't science-based, I was like, here's this pile of articles that prove it. It's just, we're not looking at it. We're prejudiced against the concept that people get better on their own.
Right. So to you, placebo is the positive ability to get better without outside guidance.
Right. Or in the absence of an active medication. And for studies, in studies, that's really what it is. It's
in the absence of a medication. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then it really is a science to be studied, like right. In that sense, because I looked at it a little bit differently, as in our bodies are made to heal, and so if you go to a medical doctor and they tell you, well, you've got, unfortunately, this is the bad news, you've got whatever, slip disc, and now it's going to impinge on this, and check out your bladder because whatever, you're creating a nocebo impact.
Absolutely. Oh, without a doubt. And I didn't hear that word nocebo until 15 years after I graduated from medical school. Like, it's not taught.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
No, wow. Doctors don't know what nocebos are. And we do it all the time. Just exactly what you said.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense then. Because I was thinking, when I hear these so sad tales, of patients coming in feeling like they've had the verdict of death now, and I don't mean death, but like worse, dying for the rest of their life. To me, that's like, how could they say that to anyone? Like, you're taking away any hope that and the fact that there's actually other options which may have outside different outcomes, right?
Right. There is always the ability to repair yourself under any circumstance. And if someone were to come to me with a situation like that, I would say, believe the diagnosis, slip disc. Don't believe the prognosis. Right. One, they do not naturally lead onto that.
Exactly. Yeah. I say separate them too. Remove the story.
Right. And then look up everything you possibly can about anyone who ever recovered from this on their own. Because if one person did it, and they did, you can too.
Well, exactly. That's how, again, that's a statistic thing, it's like, who's in charge of the statistics about that? Right. Absolutely. Okay. Well, so how can people, I'm going to have your website up, and I'm going to have your bio, but anything, you're writing a book, right?
Right. I am writing a book.
Okay. So if people want to find out more or be in touch with you, you've given me everything that they can so far to get hold of you?
Yeah, so it's my name, ElizabethHughesMD.com, and that's Elizabeth with a Z. So yes, and there's information there, and I'm happy to have have people find me. Read my blogs, look at my videos.
Yeah, and the other thing I completely forgot. For those of us who are in this sort of science-based kind of paradigm, could you give us a list of these studies, or where to get educated on the placebo? But there's more than that. There's plenty more. Do you have resources or books that people?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you 4, and I will send them to you too, so they can add it. So I'm going to give 3 books and then 1 person. The first book is The Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton. Does epigenetic research, brilliant man. The next is The Molecules of Emotion by Dr. Candace Pert. She founded the study of psychoneuroimmunology, how our thoughts and our emotions affect how our body works. And it's wonderful, wonderful work. And it's approachable if you're not super duper sciencey, but it's good for those of us who have the science background. The third book I'll recommend is When the Body Says No by Dr. Gabor Mate. You're smiling, it's a great book. It's a wonderful book. And then if you're interested in placebo research, Dr. Ted Kapchuk, Kaptchuk, he runs the Center for Placebo Studies at Harvard.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Yeah, no, those are great recommendations. And actually, Dr. Gabor Mate was just on BBC recently, really talking about addiction, and what we have to look at to understand that that's the symptom of, and it's like, it really changes how we're diagnosing and what we're making the diagnosis mean, so anyway, that's a great recommendation.
Yeah, he's done so many interesting things, and I think this is one of his earlier works before the addiction work that he's done, but so it's still awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, it is great. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing all this with me and my audience, and well, I look forward to reading your book when it comes out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Manon. This is wonderful.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.